In the darkest years of the Cold War, there was one terrifying question that haunted military planners in Washington every single day. What if the Soviet Union launched its nuclear missiles, and America didn't see them coming? An intercontinental ballistic missile could travel across the planet in less than 30 minutes. Once launched, there would be almost no way to stop it. Entire cities could disappear before anyone even realized an attack had begun. In the nuclear age, survival depended on one critical advantage: time. Even a few minutes of warning could mean the difference between chaos and an organized response. It could allow American bombers to take off, missile crews to prepare for retaliation, and national leadership to make decisions that might shape the fate of millions. Without early warning, the United States could be caught completely off guard. So during the Cold War, America built one of the most extraordinary surveillance networks ever created: a massive chain of radar systems stretching across the northern edge of the continent, designed to watch the skies every second of every day. These radars had one mission: to detect Soviet missiles the moment they rose above the horizon. This system became known as the Ballistic Missile Early Warning System, or BMEWS. Combined with the command centers of NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, it formed a technological shield designed to protect an entire continent. Giant radar stations were built in some of the most remote and inhospitable places on Earth, locations chosen because they provided the earliest possible view of missiles flying from the Soviet Union toward North America. Frozen landscapes in Greenland, wind-swept coastlines in Alaska, isolated military installations in northern Canada. From these distant outposts, enormous radar antennas scanned the sky constantly, searching for the unmistakable signature of a ballistic missile launch. These machines were unlike anything the world had seen before. Towering radar arrays the size of buildings, massive transmitters powerful enough to send signals hundreds or even thousands of miles across the atmosphere, and computers, some of the most advanced of their time, capable of processing enormous amounts of radar data in real time. If a Soviet missile ever launched toward North America, the BMEWS radar network would be the first to know. Within seconds of detection, warning signals would be transmitted to command centers, where military officers would analyze the data and determine whether the United States was under attack. At the heart of this command system was NORAD, headquartered deep inside a mountain in Colorado. Inside the famous Cheyenne Mountain complex, American and Canadian military personnel monitored radar feeds from across the continent. The facility was built inside solid granite, designed to survive even a nuclear blast. If the worst ever happened, this command center would remain operational. From there, decisions could be made that would determine the course of a nuclear war. But building a system capable of detecting missiles traveling through space was an enormous technological challenge. Missiles move incredibly fast. Their trajectories crossed thousands of miles of sky, and the radar systems designed to detect them needed to be powerful enough to see objects moving at extreme speeds far beyond the horizon. During the 1950s, American engineers began developing radar systems capable of doing exactly that. What they created would become one of the most important defensive technologies of the entire Cold War, because in a world where nuclear missiles could cross oceans in minutes, the ability to see them coming could mean the difference between survival and catastrophe. But constructing this early warning system required building enormous radar stations in some of the harshest environments on the planet, and ensuring that these facilities could operate continuously under extreme conditions. And as you'll see next, the scale of the BMEWS network was unlike anything the United States had ever attempted before. Entire mountains of steel, concrete, and electronics dedicated to one purpose: watching the skies and waiting for the first sign of war. Building a radar system capable of detecting nuclear missiles was not simply a matter of installing antennas and turning on the power. The challenge was far greater than that. During the early years of the Cold War, ballistic missiles represented a completely new kind of threat. Unlike bombers, which could be tracked as they cross the ocean over several hours, ballistic missiles move at extraordinary speeds and follow trajectories that carry them far above the Earth's atmosphere. Once launched, an intercontinental ballistic missile could reach its target in roughly 30 minutes. And for much of that flight, the missile would travel through the upper atmosphere and even into space. Traditional radar systems were never designed to track objects moving at such extreme speeds over such vast distances. American engineers had to invent entirely new technologies. The solution became the Ballistic Missile Early Warning System, or BMEWS, one of the most advanced radar networks ever constructed. The basic idea was both simple and incredibly ambitious. Instead of relying on a single radar station, the United States would build several massive radar installations positioned in locations that provided the earliest possible view of missiles launched from Soviet territory. Because the Soviet Union sat across the Arctic from North America, most intercontinental missiles traveling toward the United States would follow paths over the polar region. This meant that the earliest possible detection points were located in the far north. So American planners chose 3 strategic locations. The first site was built in Thule, Greenland, the second in Clear, Alaska, and the third at RAF Fylingdales in the United Kingdom. These locations formed a giant radar barrier across the northern hemisphere. If a missile launched from the Soviet Union, it would almost certainly pass through the detection range of at least one of these installations. But building radar stations in such remote environments was an enormous logistical undertaking. The Thule site in Greenland, for example, was located in one of the most extreme climates on Earth. Temperatures regularly plunged far below freezing. Powerful winds swept across the frozen landscape, and construction crews faced conditions that were both dangerous and unpredictable. Transporting the massive radar components required cargo ships, aircraft, and specialized equipment capable of operating in Arctic conditions. Yet despite these challenges, the United States pushed forward with remarkable speed. During the late 1950s and early 1960s, enormous radar facilities began to rise from these frozen landscapes. The radar antennas themselves were massive structures. Towering steel frameworks held large radar arrays capable of transmitting powerful radio waves into the sky. When those waves struck an object, such as a missile traveling through space, the signal would bounce back toward the radar receiver. By analyzing the return signal, computers could determine the object's position, speed, and trajectory. At the time, this required some of the most advanced computing systems ever built. Early computers filled entire rooms with rows of cabinets packed with electronic components. They processed radar signals, filtered out noise, and calculated the paths of potential missile threats. Operators in control rooms monitored large display screens that showed radar tracks moving across the sky. If a suspicious object appeared on the radar, alarms would immediately alert the operators. But detecting a missile was only the beginning. The next step was determining whether the object was actually a threat. Because the radar systems could detect many different types of objects, satellites, aircraft, space debris, and even unusual atmospheric reflections, false alarms were a serious concern. If the system mistakenly identified a harmless object as a missile attack, it could trigger a chain of events with terrifying consequences. For that reason, multiple verification procedures were built into the early warning system. Radar data from different stations would be compared. Analysts would examine the trajectory of the detected object to determine whether it matched the flight path of a ballistic missile. Only after careful confirmation would an official warning be transmitted. If an actual missile launch were detected, the information would be sent immediately to NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command. At NORAD's headquarters deep inside Cheyenne Mountain, officers would analyze the incoming data and determine whether the United States was under nuclear attack. From there, the warning would move up the chain of command. Within minutes, the President of the United States and senior military leaders could be notified. In the nuclear age, those few minutes of warning were incredibly valuable. They allowed American bomber crews to scramble aircraft into the air, missile crews to prepare for launch, and national leaders to evaluate the situation before making decisions that could determine the future of the world. Yet even with these advanced radar systems, the early warning network faced a constant challenge: the possibility of false alarms. And during the Cold War, there were several moments when radar operators believed they might be witnessing the beginning of nuclear war. Moments when the radar screens suddenly lit up with signals that looked disturbingly real. Moments when military commanders had to decide very quickly whether the United States was truly under attack. And as we'll see next, some of those moments became some of the most tense and dangerous episodes of the entire Cold War. Inside the radar control rooms of the BMEWS stations, Every shift carried a quiet but enormous weight. The operators who monitored these systems understood that the signals appearing on their radar screens could represent one of two things: a harmless object moving through the sky, or the beginning of nuclear war. During the Cold War, the radar networks operated 24 hours a day. Teams of technicians and radar specialists constantly watched the displays, analyzing every signal that appeared across the vast sweep of the system's detection range. Most of the time, the screens were calm. Occasional aircraft, satellite, and other routine objects would appear as small moving markers on the radar displays. Operators learned to recognize these patterns quickly, but the system was designed to detect something very different: a ballistic missile. When a missile launches, its rocket engines produce a powerful signal that radar systems could detect at great distances. As the missile rises above the horizon and enters its ballistic trajectory, the radar can begin tracking its movement through space. The radar computers would immediately begin calculating the object's path. If the trajectory pointed toward North America, alarms would sound. In those moments, every second mattered. Radar operators would verify the signal, checking the data carefully to ensure that the detection was real and not caused by atmospheric interference or electronic noise. Additional radar stations would attempt to confirm the detection. Within seconds, information would begin flowing toward the central command centers. Deep inside Cheyenne Mountain, NORAD officers would begin analyzing the incoming data. The command center itself was one of the most secure military facilities ever built. Constructed deep within a mountain of solid granite in Colorado, the Cheyenne Mountain complex was designed to survive nuclear attack. Massive blast doors weighing several tons protected the entrance, and the entire facility was mounted on giant springs that could absorb the shock of nearby explosions. Inside the command center, enormous display screens showed radar tracks from across the continent. Rows of consoles allowed military personnel to monitor aircraft, satellites, and missile detection simultaneously. If a missile launch were confirmed, the command center would immediately begin the process of notifying national leadership. During the Cold War, this process was carefully designed to happen extremely quickly. From the moment a missile was detected to the moment the warning reached the highest levels of government, only a few minutes might pass. But those few minutes were absolutely critical. They provided the time needed for American forces to respond. Strategic bomber crews could scramble their aircraft into the air before enemy missiles arrived. Missile crews in underground silos could prepare their systems for launch. And most importantly, national leaders would have time to determine whether the detection truly represented an attack. Yet despite the sophistication of the radar systems, the early warning network was never perfect. There were moments during the Cold War when radar signals triggered alarms that appeared frighteningly real. One of the most famous incidents occurred in 1960. Radar operators at the Thule station in Greenland suddenly detected what appeared to be a large number of missiles rising from Soviet territory. The radar screens indicated multiple objects following trajectories that seemed consistent with an incoming attack. For a brief moment, it looked as if the United States might be under nuclear assault. Military officials began evaluating the situation rapidly, but as analysts examined the data more closely, they discovered something unexpected. The radar had not detected Soviet missiles. Instead, it had detected the moon rising above the horizon under certain atmospheric conditions. The radar signal had reflected off the surface of the moon in a way that resembled the signature of ballistic missiles. The incident was quickly resolved, but it revealed an important truth. Even the most advanced early warning systems could make mistakes. Because of this, American military planners developed multiple layers of verification to ensure that no single radar detection could trigger a catastrophic response. Satellite detection systems were eventually added to the early warning network, allowing missile launches to be confirmed by infrared sensors that could detect the heat of rocket engines from space. Ground-based radar, satellite systems, and intelligence data would all be compared before any final conclusions were reached. These safeguards help prevent accidents and misunderstandings during one of the most dangerous periods in modern history. And yet, despite the occasional false alarms and technical challenges, the radar network served an essential purpose. It ensured that the United States would never be caught completely unaware. Because during the Cold War, the ability to see the first signs of an attack was one of the most important elements of nuclear deterrence. But the early warning system did more than simply watch for missiles. It became a powerful symbol of technological vigilance, a constant reminder that in the nuclear age, peace depended not only on weapons, but on the ability to detect danger before it was too late. As the Cold War continued to the 1970s and 1980s, the early warning radar network became one of the most important technological guardians of the United States. The giant radar stations in Greenland, Alaska, and the United Kingdom continued scanning the skies every second of every day, searching for the unmistakable signatures of ballistic missile launches. Their mission never changed: detect the threat, transmit the warning, give the nation time to respond. By this stage of the Cold War, nuclear weapons had reached levels of destructive power almost unimaginable to earlier generations. Both the United States and the Soviet Union possessed arsenals capable of destroying each other many times over. Yet despite this terrifying reality, nuclear war never occurred. One of the reasons was a system of deterrence built by both superpowers, a complex balance of offensive and defensive technologies designed to make any nuclear attack unthinkable. The early warning radar network was a critical part of that balance. Because if an enemy believed they could launch a surprise attack without being detected, the temptation to strike first might grow. But the existence of systems like BMEWS and NORAD made that scenario extremely unlikely. The Soviet Union understood that any missile launch would almost certainly be detected within seconds. And once detected, the United States would have time to respond. That certainty helped reinforce the doctrine that defined the nuclear age: mutually assured destruction. Both sides knew that a nuclear war would lead to catastrophic losses on both sides. Neither superpower could eliminate the other's ability to retaliate, and systems like the early warning radars ensured that the United States would never be caught by surprise. Over time, the technology continued to evolve. New radar systems were developed with greater range, improved accuracy, and the ability to track objects moving through space with extraordinary precision. Satellite detection systems added another layer of protection, allowing missile launches to be detected even earlier by observing the heat signatures of rocket engines. Together, these systems created a vast global network capable of monitoring potential threats from across the planet. The radar stations themselves became iconic structures: massive domes, towering antennas, and giant radar arrays standing against the Arctic sky. Silent sentinels watching the horizon. Most civilians never saw them. Few people understood the scale of the technology operating behind the scenes. But for decades, these systems formed an invisible shield over North America. Inside NORAD's command center at Cheyenne Mountain, personnel continued their watch year after year. Radar signals flowed continuously into the facility. Operators monitored the skies. Computers analyzed trajectories. And military officers remained ready to respond if the unthinkable ever occurred. Fortunately, that moment never came. Throughout the entire Cold War, the radar network never confirmed a real nuclear attack. The missiles it was built to detect were never launched in anger. Instead, the system fulfilled its true purpose. It helped maintain stability in one of the most dangerous periods in human history. By providing early warning and preventing surprise attacks, the radar network helped ensure that no nation could believe it could launch nuclear war without immediate consequences. And that certainly played a powerful role in keeping the Cold War from turning into something far worse. Today, the world is very different from the one that existed at the height of the Cold War, but the legacy of these early warning systems still remains. Modern radar networks and satellite systems continue to watch the skies, maintaining the vigilance that began decades ago. Because in a world where nuclear weapons still exist, the ability to detect danger early remains one of the most important safeguards humanity possesses. During the Cold War, the radar stations of BMEWS and the command center of NORAD stood at the front line of that vigilance. They watched the skies so the world could sleep a little more safely beneath them.